All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about, this is our second lesson in Microsoft Word, and so we're going to get a little bit more into different formatting tools and features that Word has to offer. And this is a short list of what we're going to cover today, and hopefully we'll get through all of it. But we'll just take kind of a quick peek at everything we see here. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the headers and the footers. And you can see I have a ruler turned on the screen up across here. And this you can get to from the View tab up at the top. So I click this, you can see the ruler box is checked. This kind of helps you see where your text is spaced in the document, and you can modify it a little bit using these arrows. And we did this a little last week, but just kind of to review, my cursor was down in this line, so as I pull on this, it pulls that line across, and I can bring it back right there. In these grayed out regions, these are our margins, and so there aren't any text, words, or anything in there. But we can change that, and we can do that either from the layout, and there's an option here for margins, where we can make it normal, narrow, moderate, or some sort of custom version. Usually I use the custom only if I'm making them as small as possible. But if you have a special piece of paper and you have some border maybe already printed on it, that would be a good use for those custom margins. You could measure on your page where you want your text to fall and then make sure that it matches on the document. And so coming back here, just to also show this little arrow up top, it'll move it just the same as the one below. So it doesn't matter which one you pull on. But we can also work in that margin space. And we do that through headers and footers. And to put one in, we're going to go to the Insert tab. And you can see there's all different sorts of things going across that we can add to the document. But right here, where my mouse is, this is where the header, footer, and page number options live. And so for a basic header, you can see it gives you a little description if you hover over. But if you click the drop down, it'll show you some little default headers that you can put on your page. You have some very simple ones, one with columns, and you have some that are a little bit more graphically interesting. So if we want just a basic one, we can change this to any of the others too. So let's click on this to get started, and you can see now we're working within that margin space. And it's grayed out all the rest of the document. It just has a little white area in that line where we're working. And we can type whatever you want here. So maybe it would make sense for us to put today's date. So we'll put April 13, 2021. So we see that there. And maybe we want to move it somewhere else. Maybe we decide we want it here. If you look, as I move my cursor across the middle of the page, it switches. It goes from this left hanging alignment to this centered alignment. And if I double click here, now I can type in the middle as though I'd inserted a column. So I could put a title here perhaps. And then maybe you can see as I move across, once again, it'll switch to this right alignment. And I can double click and have that third column. And I could move my date over here without too much trouble. And maybe make this a name instead. So I'm just highlighting it and putting a name. And once you're done working in a header, you can make some adjustments, either changing the size of it, changing where it falls from the text using these different buttons. We can make it a little bit lower by increasing that distance. And we can make a little bit more space. This is for the footer. You can see if we scroll down, it has created a footer for us. We can make that a little bigger too. But once we're all done, we can hit close header and footer, or we can double click anywhere in the document. Either way will work. So I'll show you by double clicking. Now we're back in the document, and it's grayed out that header and footer region. Now let's say we want to put in page numbers in a footer. We can do that the same way. We'd go to go to Insert, and then go to either footer or page number. Footer is more useful if, say, you want to put a chapter number or something, like you're writing as though a book. That would be helpful there. Page number is useful mostly because it automatically knows in Word that you're going to be increasing this and changing it for every page. And so it's very helpful to use this feature if you want to put in page numbers. And you can put them at the top or the bottom, doesn't matter which. You'll just go over and then select which one you want. I always like this centered one. And you can adjust the text in here just as you would anywhere else in the document. You can go to your Home tab and maybe change the font. Maybe you want it Times New Roman. Type that in. And now it's just a different font. You can make it bigger, change the color even, anything you want. Helps if I highlight it, I suppose. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And so just like that, we can double click out. And now we have a page number. And if we were to create another page, and so this is a little bit different. We're going to insert a page break, and this is kind of an advanced formatting tool, but we'll use this just to show the example of what will happen when we have another page. What it does is it copies that header from the first page onto the second page, and then it automatically updates that page number to match the page of the document. Now, if you want this to be different, so perhaps maybe the first page is different, you can change this by going into those header formatting tools, and there's some options down here. There's more headers, edit header, remove header. That way you can get rid of it altogether. And from edit, you have the option under this design tab to have a different first page. So maybe on this one, you only want the title. So we could delete that and make this bigger perhaps. And so now you have a different first page, and we'll hit close. And now we have, oops. So I did that while working on the second page. And so it treated this as the first page and changed that up for me. But we can always use our undo tool, which is helpful too. So let's go back to our page setup. There we go. Go from here. We'll edit this header. We can also double click to do the same thing. There we go. Now we're in that edit, and we can do different first page. And now it has made that one blank for us. And we can click in the middle, double click, there we go, title. And now we have this up here and this down here, like we were getting at before. So that's kind of a basic overview for headers and footers. And now we're going to talk a little bit about word art, which is kind of fun if you want to put this in the header as well. Word art lives under the Insert tab. There's lots of things under here. And just to the right of headers and footers, we have word art. And what you can do is you can click this little drop-down button, and you can see kind of some samples of what this word art looks like. So let's come up with a word that we want to have in fancy letters. So perhaps we'll do the title of this. We'll do Learning Lunches. And we're going to make this into word art. So we'll highlight what we have and then click this word art drop down arrow. And if we click any of these kind of pre-selected ones, maybe click something close to what we want, kind of like this gradient A, that's nice. Now it gives us this formatting tab, and we can make adjustments in here as much as we want. So there's all different kinds of options for outlines, fill colors, outline colors. But here under the word art styles is where it gets pretty specific. And you see these different text effects. And these are probably the most interesting ones. This is a good place if you want to make something that has some 3D effects. Something like that. Or maybe if you rotate it a little. This will change the spacing quite a bit in your document, so do be prepared for that. Let's click on this one. Now it's kind of going off into space. And you notice now it has this picture next to it. It's being treated as a text box now and a little bit like a picture. And right now it has its text wrapping as a square. If we want this to be in line with the text like we had it before, we just have to select that option. And we'll talk about this more when we get to pictures too. So just be aware that some of these different changes that you may make can turn it into a picture. And there aren't necessarily a lot of different uses for this. I typically think it's kind of over the top. It's more the sort of thing that I typically see younger folks doing just to play around and have fun with it. But it's definitely worth knowing what's out there and exploring it just a little. So you can change the background color too. If you want to change the text color, you'd go in here. You can go into this gradient and change that around. Not sure why it's doing those colors. That's kind of interesting and different because it's not matching the preview. So what I'll do is I'll try to click this guy and see if it'll update. There we go. Sometimes things get a little bit funky. And here's a cool one where it's darker in the center and lighter on the outside. So play around with that as much as you want. It could be fun for greetings cards or things like that. And you can get fancy with the font and change those around just like before. So definitely take some time to explore it, but maybe don't use it further, a professional report or something like that. On the other hand, lists are something that are kind of universally helpful. You can see I even made one today when I was making this document, talking about the things I wanted to cover. And a list can take a few different forms. And this is one that doesn't live under the Insert tab. It's right here on the Home tab under this Paragraph tool. And right at the top, we've got this bulleted list, this numbered list, and this multi-level numbered list. And these are useful for different things. Typically, I use these when I'm making an outline or some kind of list for things that I'm working on in a paper later on. And you can either start one of these by clicking the type you want and then beginning to list different things. So maybe this is a shopping list. So perhaps we need to pick up eggs and milk and bananas and maybe lettuce. So you can see why this is kind of helpful. It goes really quickly and it automatically does all the formatting for the list for you. Now, if perhaps you don't want this next line to be a bulleted list, you can either click that button again, and now it goes back in line with the text, or what you can do is you can just hit the backspace. First, we'll get rid of the bullet, then we'll get rid of the indent, and then it'll get rid of the second indent. Either way works. Typically, I find pressing the indent button is a little bit better. On the other hand, you can change these bullets too. So maybe you want now to have a different list. So you can click this little drop-down arrow and your next list is for maybe a different store. Maybe you need to go to the hardware store and you're going to change the type of bullet to indicate that. So all I've done is I've clicked the drop-down, clicked this empty bullet to indicate that it's a little bit different, and then I can keep typing again. It keeps the other formatting the same. So maybe I need to get, I don't know, nails and lumber, and I don't know what else I would need at a hardware store, maybe a bucket. And you can see it also automatically capitalizes all of these. And that can be helpful, or maybe if you don't want that, you can always click this autocorrect button that pops up and hit undo automatic capitalization. Or if you don't want it to do it for the rest of the document, click this stop auto capitalizing first letter of sentences. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too in a little bit. Whoops. Doing this with the mouse pad instead of the mouse. There we go. So let's say we're making a different type of list, a numbered list. This is helpful if there's some kind of order that's important to this. So maybe the order of tasks is important today because the different stores you have to go to will open and close at different times. And so perhaps you need to go, we'll click this button, first to the mechanic, then to the groceries. And then when you're at the grocery store, you need to go to the two different stores. You gotta go get food and you gotta go get hardware. Whoops, helps if I spell it right. Doop. There we go. And you can see what it's done is it's made a sublist. And I got to that by hitting tab after I hit enter. You can do the same thing in a bulleted list. So from maybe I need 2 different types of milk, I can hit enter, it'll make a new bullet, and then I can hit tab and it'll make another bullet closer in. If I don't like the way it looks, I can change it up here. So now maybe I want it to be a square. So maybe I want whole and I want 2%. Just kind of a silly example, but just to illustrate the point. And say over here at the hardware store, maybe there's 2 different types. If I hit tab again, what you can see is it now has our lowercase Roman numeral. So we have a little I, and it'll keep doing this. So maybe particularly we need to go to Home Depot, just the first one that came to my head. You'll see it'll do that again, and then I'll hit tab one more time, and now it's back to numbers. And that's how this multi-level list works. And it's really helpful if you're doing an outline. And if you don't like, once again, this order of numbers to letters to Roman numerals, you can highlight all of this and you can change it up here. You'll go to the multi-level list and click the drop-down arrow, and you can pick what you prefer. There's some that use bullets. There's some that use, this is what it's in, this sort of decimal classification for these. And you can change this too, and you can also make custom ones by defining a new multi-level list or defining a new list style. And these are a little bit complicated. You can see all you have to do though is go in and tell what you want each number to be. So maybe I want this to be letters afterwards, and maybe this, instead of lowercase Roman numerals, I want uppercase Roman numerals. So I could edit that, and now it's a big I. And that's all I'd have to do to change these. And it gives me kind of a preview of what that'll look like on here. And I can go in and update that again for each of the ones that I want to change. So big I dot. And this is also a place where you could get rid of the dot and make it a parenthesis too. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't really want to save that on my computer, but that's how you would change that to make it look exactly the way you want. So lots of versatility here. Another feature in Word that gives you a lot of versatility is tables. There are tons of different ways to make tables in Microsoft Word. And these live under that Insert tab again. And you can see right here, right underneath, it says Table. And what this will do, if I just click the button, is it will give me this sort of grid. And this is my preferred way, usually, of making a table in Word. And you can see a little preview as I go of what this will look like on the screen. And so this is just a bunch of one column, many rows. But you can see as I move across, it's changing what that grid looks like. And it automatically makes them evenly spaced, evenly sized, and they all have a little black border. And these are all things that you can change. So maybe I want to have, maybe this is my schedule. And so I want something with maybe 7 days of the week. So maybe this is going to be Sunday, Monday. And you can also notice that it'll start telling me what it thinks I'm going to type as I type in. And I can just hit enter to automatically fill that. And it'll automatically adjust the size as I type too, which is helpful. And you can type it in and do whatever you want with these. There's no wrong way to do it. You're not going to mess anything up. And so perhaps in this column, I'll write subject because this will be the different subject that I'm studying each day. So maybe math, English. Oops. Now notice what happened here is I hit the enter key, and that created a new line in my table. If I don't want that, what I'll do is instead hit the little down arrow, and it'll bring me automatically to the next little section. So I'm going to hit the down arrow again, type in chemistry, and maybe this one will be physics. And perhaps what I'd do is I would just put an X into which subjects I have each day. So maybe first day I have math, history, and chemistry. Then I have English, history, and physics. And this is one sort of table that you could make, and it would be just one example of how this could look. Bloop. But there's all different sorts of things you can do in this. Up here we get this design table, and you can change what the table looks like from here, and I'll give a little preview as I go through. See how it changes the colors and it changes the bands as well, making it a little bit easier to read. This can be helpful for different types of documents. So let's go over to this green one, just because that looks pretty nice. And we'll get to see some of these different options. Right here it says header row, and what this indicates is that it's making the header row a different format than the rest of the table. If I unselect that, you can see what happens. It changes that first line, and we kind of want that to be different so that we can see it's not part of the body of the table. If you were doing something like maybe you were making an itemized list for a bill that you were presenting to a customer, you'd probably want this total row, and it makes the bottom line stand out differently, and you would put probably your total at the end. You can get rid of that too. You can also get rid of the banded rows. This one's pretty simple, so it's not necessarily hard to read, so maybe we don't need that. But you could do it for columns as well if that made sense in your context. Once again, kind of with that idea of maybe totals, maybe your last column is a total, you can select this option, last column, and that'll change the formatting there. And you can customize it however you want by modifying any of these. You'd go to modify table style, and you'd make the changes you want in here, and then hit OK. And that's just one way to make a table. Now when I hit enter, it makes a new line, and it keeps going. So if we don't want that, we'll have to make sure we click outside of the table, and then, oops, here on me. And usually what's helpful, it's not working for me today, make sure that you're underneath it, or that you have selected the whole table, and then click the little to the right arrow, and that'll work for you. Now, if we're making a table a different way, what we would do is we can go to this little drop down, and this is once again where that comes up. But you can also draw the table in yourself if you want. And this is helpful for some folks who are maybe still planning it out as they go. And you can use this little tool to draw in what it'll look like. So maybe you know the first column is going to be different, and you can draw in all of your different lines depending on where you want them. And this is helpful sometimes if you don't know what it'll look like until you're already working on it. And you can draw in a new line below it just as easily. And this is really helpful if you're making a custom sort of table as well. Maybe I only want this to go about halfway across. I can do that if I want. Those are all options. Once I'm done, I can just hit the escape key. Oops, I did not hit the escape key. I hit one of my other keys, but that's okay. And then you have exactly what you drew. And another way to put in a table, and this is one that I think is probably the most useful, is an Excel spreadsheet. And what this does is it embeds an Excel spreadsheet in your Word document. And this gives you lots of different versatility later on working with this. So this allows you to do anything you would in Excel and then have it in Word. So perhaps here, this is something where we're talking about maybe product sales. And this is product A, B, C, and D. And maybe these are different quarters. So maybe this is quarter 1 and quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. And maybe 50 were sold here, 80 of these, 12, 30. And I'm just making up these numbers so I can show you the cool math that it will do for me in a minute if I want. So maybe 23. And what I'm doing here is I'm just typing in numbers and I'm using the arrow keys to change where I'm at in the Excel spreadsheet and just clicking to select them. So now that I've filled that out, if I want, I can have this total row down here, kind of like I was talking about before. And you can use the features of Excel to make this work. You can put in formulas. So here I would want a sum formula, and it gives me that. So if you're familiar with Excel, you can use all of those same tools as you would in Excel in your Word document. And then once again, tools that you'd use in Excel, copy it right over. And then when you're done, all you have to do is click back in your Word document, and it's created that chart for you. And you may say, well, this doesn't quite look like what I want it to. Well, you can double click, and then in Excel, you can go to, click somewhere in the data, insert, table. Maybe you want it to have that full set of data. We'll click the whole range. My table does have headers, hit OK. And now you get those same formatting options as you had in Word. And here we maybe want this total row. And perhaps the banded rows we don't need. So you can change this around and then shrink the size to exactly what you want to have in your Word document. Boop. This might be a little bit small, but there we go. Now you have pretty much the same table as we would have had if we had made it in Word, but now it has the formula functionality of Excel. So that's a really handy feature to put in. And in the same way, we also can insert charts. And so this maybe isn't the data we want to have a chart on, but what if we wanted some sort of pie chart in our Word document? We can click Insert Chart, select the type of chart we want, hit OK. And not only does it bring in the chart, it also auto-creates these columns in Excel that are going to populate that chart. And so what we can do here is maybe we want it to match what we had in there before. That first quarter, we want it to be these totals. And maybe we want this 172, 220, this is 212, and this one is 229. Whoop, there we go. We'll hit enter, and now we can see it's updated that chart. And we can just hit this little X, and now we have this chart in our Word document. If we need to edit this data again, all we need to do is click on the chart. So maybe we're working somewhere else, click on the chart, go to Edit Data, because you can see this new design and format option has appeared, and these allow you to make some adjustments, change the way it looks. We can go to Edit Data, and it'll bring that Excel chart up again. And that's now embedded and saved with our Word document. We don't have to save it anywhere else. So we can close that and keep on going. So this is just another handy tool if you're trying to utilize some of the different features of Word to make a document. And Daphne, I see you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually wondering if you would select the total row in the table and you then do insert chart. Can it also make a chart then without you needing to put in all the numbers?
Yeah, it can definitely do that. So what I would do is I'd go in here, and it's gonna bring this up for me. I'd go to total, select this, and I'd go to insert, and you can see it's a different sort of tab, it now looks like Excel. And I could go to chart, and I could go to this pie chart, and it looks a little different. Oop. There we go. And then I could click out. Oh, didn't quite format that correctly. Here, let me hit OK. Select that data. Ah, that's why. Here, I'll delete. Sometimes Excel and we struggle. Here we go. There we go. So now we could just change the space a little bit. Move that down. And this is one way to do it. We can also make it so that, just like before, we grab that chart data from that Excel table. So that's one way. It looks a little messy. So we could do it, hit enter here. Insert, we'll put in a chart. We'll put in another pie chart. See if we can do it this way. I haven't actually tried it this way before. So let me see. What I think I would do, honestly, in this case, is I would copy. Maybe that won't do it for me. I'd have to explore to figure out exactly how to make that work. But it looks like it's definitely doable. Let me see. If we go under that design tab again, go to select data. I'm looking for a way for it to let me select where it's coming from and pick from it inside a different part of the Word document. But it might not let me do it that way. Whoops. I just popped out of Word for a minute. That was exciting. Let me see. There might be a way to do it also from a table inside of Word. And we could try that too. So we can always click inside of a space that we've edited in Excel and copy it into another type of table. So let me scroll up a little. I can grab all of this. I'm going to hit Control C to copy. Click outside. And we'll insert a table. And so, let's see, this is roughly, what, 5 columns by 6? So 6 by 5. Boop. I know it's always fun to watch someone troubleshoot in the recording. Oh, but it will not paste it. So this is something I would want to explore a little bit more of, because it's being a little bit funky, but I'm sure it's definitely an option. I'm imagining that what can happen is if I copy this correctly, if I copy, select outside, my thought is it's not appearing on the clipboard in the right format. Here we go. Perfect. There we go. So now that's in there. And I'm wondering if by selecting that, we can go to design, maybe? You can see it's being a little bit weird. I don't see an option to snag that data and copy it into a chart. But I think what you would want to do is just copy it to the clipboard as text, and then you could paste it into the, go into the chart itself. Maybe into this chart. This is where I'd edit the data. Here we go. It's not bringing that little pop-up up for me today. Not sure what it's doing. Here. Design, edit data. Oh well, not sure what it's doing. But we can always look at that a little bit more and bring it up next week too. But just a few more things when you're working in some of these tables. Um, if you ever decide you want to edit these in a way that you're not sure how to, a lot of this lives under the Layout tab. And my Zoom menu is right in front. There it is, went away. There we go. And you can see there's lots of different options here to delete, insert rows or columns. And so if we wanted to maybe get rid of this column because there's nothing in it, we can just delete it. And you see it gives us different options. We can either delete the cell or delete the whole column. We'll select that, and it changes the size here. And we can adjust that if we want. Maybe we delete this other one by pulling this across, and this will adjust it all at once. If we only wanted one of these tabs to be different, what we could do is adjust it from here. See how the cursor changes just a little bit? I could pull that along, and you can see it has up top on that ruler that I showed you before, those options, and you can use those to push around the text as well. And it also works like Excel in the sense that if you double click on this, it'll snap the fit to be exactly the size of the text. So if I double click, well, maybe it won't today. There we go. Just had to double click it right, I guess. And you can see it folds it down to be just big enough to hold the text inside. There we go. Can do it on this end too. Boop, usually. Sometimes it's a little finicky and you have to get it just right. So that's kind of an overview of tables and charts. And I'd love to go more into that with the charts and see what I can figure out. But before we run out of time, I'd love to show you all some stuff about equations and symbols too. And you've probably noticed as we've gone through, there's just a lot of options on this Insert tab. And way on the far side is where the equations and symbol masters go. So symbols is just what you'd expect. If I go to more symbols, you can see first there's kind of this basic selection, and then you have this whole library full of them. And they all have a little character code, and they're organized loosely by type. And so we have different alphabets in here, and I typically find them hard to navigate, but there's this little button up here which can help you out. So basic Latin symbols, these extended ones, and then as you scroll down, different sorts of options. So if you're looking specifically for your superscripts and subscripts, you can click here, and that helps you find what you're looking for, currency symbols. And so that's one way to navigate this. I personally find this a little bit cumbersome if I'm using this a lot, particularly if I'm doing something with degrees or typing a report for chemistry. So what I usually do instead is I go to the File tab and I make all of these shortcuts. So from File, you have some options and they all live under proofing. And this is where different autocorrect features live too. You can change what it updates for you automatically, ignoring words that are in uppercase, and these are just general proofing tools, checking for spelling as you type, marking grammar errors, and it goes on. But up at the top, there's these autocorrect options, and typically it pops up under here, and what it does is it shows the ways that it autocorrects what you type. And the first way that it does it is like if you have maybe two capitals in a row, it'll adjust it so that it only has one capital. These are just common typing errors that usually happen as you're typing quickly. And then they have some of these, and this is where kind of the magic happens. You can see that this is the little code that you would type in, and this is the symbol that it spits out. And so if you were to type in this little frowny face, it would make a frowny face in your document. And there's all different kinds of these. These are all the symbol ones. But it also goes into words too. So if you commonly have a word that you mistype or an abbreviation that you want to fill out automatically, you can even make your own up here. So maybe you have a really long title for something. Maybe all you want is, oh, it actually already has this one in here. I might have done this already, but perhaps H2O is something that you want it to change automatically for you. You can tell it to do this. I did this last time actually because I thought it would be fun. So let's well, hit OK just to see how this works. I'll hit OK again. And if I type that H2O and hit space, it'll automatically change it to the full formula name. And this works for other things too. And where this becomes really useful, I'm going to just quickly go back to that screen, hit OK, proof it. There we go. Just got to remember where you go in autocorrect options. This math autocorrect you can turn on, and I have it turned on my computer. It isn't usually on by default, but you just click these two little buttons, and then all of these extra symbols will appear when you type. So if you're using a lot of Greek letters, this backslash and then typing out the name of that Greek letter will put it in for you. And this is really helpful. One of my favorites for this is, because I can never remember where they live, is these degree options. So you can put in the /degree C or /degree F, and it'll put it right in for you. So I'll hit OK and show how that works. So this is \degree F space. Got to have the right syntax. Notice that they're all in lowercase, space, and it'll change it for me. And this works for all of these different symbols. And that's really helpful if you're using this a lot. Otherwise, you have this option with the equations. And this is something that I've used a lot in chemistry lab reports, not so much recently, but depending on what you're working on, it can be helpful. So what I've done is I've gone to Insert, clicked Equation, and it creates this new tab up here for the window that lets you have all of these symbols pretty handy. And you can insert them in different ways. You can make your fractions and your radicals and even things like integrals and large sigmas and things like that. You can also, under Word, if you have kind of a newer version, this ink to equation, which can be helpful. Maybe you're writing, I'm not sure, maybe you just want to do a squared, don't mind my terrible pen handwriting here, b squared equals c squared. Depending on what you're doing, now see, it thinks that's an alpha because of the way I've written my 2. I can just delete it and try again. Boop. And then I'd hit insert and it would stick that equation in for me. So that's handy too, depending on what you're working on. Otherwise, you end up kind of just picking whatever is closest to what you're working on and then inserting from there. There's also a bunch of shortcuts for these within that math tab where you'd do the backslash and type in some letters. And I don't know them off the top of my head, but a lot of folks that I know who do code have just kind of memorized these because they're using it so regularly. And so that's kind of an introduction to equations. There's so much that you can do with it. You could just kind of spend all day working on those. And then we're going to just go into a few more different kind of fun things that you can insert. And these are your pictures and your shapes, and they also live under insert. Depending on what version of Word you have, these will look a little differently. There's this Smart Art option. Some versions of Word have icons, but almost every version of Word has shapes and pictures. So under shapes, it's just what you'd think, all of your kind of classic shapes that you imagine in clip art in Word. And you can select what you want, maybe the star, and you'll just draw it by, you see this different cursor. You'll click roughly where you want it and then pull it across however you want. See how it can kind of distort? If I were to hold the shift key down, now it's keeping that aspect ratio the same. So I can let it go And you see it's right in front of all of my text, which is not exactly what I want. And you have some ways to adjust that. Once you have a shape selected on your screen, it gives you this Format tab for the shape, and you can change the position and the text wrap of it from here. And so here's just general alignment of the picture. So here maybe I want it in the upper left, and maybe I want it to be tight with my text. And so now you can see the text has shaped itself to kind of be around the outline of the shape itself. And that can be fun depending on what you're working on. And shapes are interesting because in Word, you can use a shape like a text box. And so if I click on this shape as I have here and I start typing, then I get to have my text inside of it. Now, granted, it's a little bit cramped because a star is a weird shape to have, but if I make it a little bigger, you can see that you are a star, and you can change it however you want. Change the font just as you would with your regular text by going to Home and changing it up here. Maybe a fun style, maybe make it purple. And maybe make the star bright yellow by going to Format. See where it says Shape Fill? You can just click here and change that around. And now you can see loosely how you would insert a shape like that and adjust it. Pictures work pretty much the same way. You can't necessarily type inside of a picture as you would inside a shape, but you'd insert it just as you would a shape by either going to Pictures or Online Pictures. Pictures is going to have you browse for one on your a photo on your computer. So something I've been working on is a seed library. So I have all these pictures of plants. So we'll insert maybe these flowers here. And you can see there's some different formatting that's already been done to this shape. If I didn't like quite the way it looked around the border, unfortunately I can't change it from here because it sees the border as this white bit of the image that I'd already made. But what I can do is I can crop it. And this is something that you can do in Word, and it's really helpful as you're adjusting things to look the way you want them to. So there we go. So now we can't see some of those weird sort of features that I've done, and we can add different features for ourselves. Let's make it a little bit bigger so that these changes will stand out. It's a bit of a blurry picture, but that's okay. You can use some of these different tools like the remove background or the corrections to adjust how it looks. So corrections is going to change things like the contrast and the brightness. And so right here, maybe we want it to be a little bit brighter, and we want those darks and lights to be a little bit more intense. We'd go this way with it. And now you can see it's changed a little, and it gives you a real-time preview as you work on it that way. Another thing that's handy is you can change the colors too. This one, where you change it to black and white, isn't usually useful with pictures, but if you're taking a picture of a document and then adjusting it in your Word document, this can be helpful to kind of get rid of all of your background noise, crinkles in the paper, and things like that. You can also set a transparent color using this tool here to get rid of a background too. So that can be helpful. Artistic effects are just kind of fun ways to change the way it looks, give it some different flavor. Maybe this is something for a greetings card that you're making. That's kind of cool. So I'm going to leave it like that. And then you can change things like the border. And this is what had happened to it before, something that I had adjusted. And you can give it different frames and give it some reflections. These are making it a little bit too big to show up on the screen, but you can see just some basic little snapshot style changes. This one with the little shadow just makes it pop out a little bit. So those are some things that you can do with pictures. And if you don't have a photo on your computer that you want to use, you can also insert from stock images online. And that's what these online pictures do for you. So I am a sucker for puppies. So as soon as this comes up, I'm definitely going to type puppies into that little search bar, and it searches the web for common law available pictures, and you can see we get quite a few wonderful little creatures that have popped up. This little Saint Bernard is pretty great, so I'm going to insert him. And it takes a minute to download, but then you have your picture up and you can use all those same features to play with it too. You can shrink it by clicking on a corner and dragging it around. You can adjust how it's positioned in the document, and you can make it do whatever you want. So here I have it in line, and I'm going to go to Home and click Center. And so now it's centered on the page. And so this is a useful way to kind of add pictures to flare up your document. And we have a little bit of time left, so I'll show you how to insert a hyperlink. So perhaps you have a link on your computer that you want to be able to access from your Word document. This is how you could do it. From this Insert tab, you can see we have this hyperlink option. So we can highlight this. You have to select something to become the link. So it can be text, it could be this picture, it doesn't matter what it is. And we'd go to hyperlink, and you can see it gives us lots of different options. Right now, it has selected all of these different folders on my computer. You can also put in an address, so maybe a YouTube video or a web address or an email address. These are all things you could insert in here. One of the ways that a friend of mine uses this is he has 3D models that he likes to have saved kind of in the folder, and there is usually a picture kind of a screenshot of it in the document, and then people can click on it and it'll pop up a new window with that model that they can then rotate around and see what it looks like. It's kind of a handy tool. So maybe I just want this to link to my email. And so I would just type in, whoops. Yeah, so it puts in that automatic mail to bozeman.net. And so this, when I hit OK, it's going to change the color of that hyperlink. And so if I were to click Control and then click, now it's bringing up some email stuff on my end. I don't know if it appears on Zoom, but now that it's been, yeah, I didn't think so. Usually if a new window appears, it doesn't pop up. So anyhow, that's roughly how it works. But there's other things that you can do with it too, which is pretty useful. So maybe this picture of these flowers is really important, and we need to be able to access it throughout the document. You can make it a bookmark, which is kind of an interesting thing. And this only applies to the document you're working in. So maybe we'll call it flower photo. And we'll hit, oops, let me see. It's not letting me add it, so let me see if I've done something wrong. This is working really well for me in a different document, so I might pull that up instead. If this is going to be silly, I might need to select a portion of the page instead. So we'll click right here. Yep, it's letting me do it here. So it has to be not on an item, but on a piece of the document. So we'll hit Add. And then what you could do is with this hyperlink, maybe I want to edit this link. I right click it, hit Edit Hyperlink. And instead of this, maybe I want it to say picture page. And instead of going to this email address, what I'd do is I would click Place Document. And now it gives me all these different options. I can go to my header, or I could go, it brings up this bookmarks option, and I can select the flower option here. So if I hit OK, now if I hit Control click, what'll happen is it'll bring me to that bookmark. Now I'm back up on the top of the page. And this isn't really a particularly great use of this tool, but I think I have it up at the moment. So I'll do a new share just to show how this looks a little bit in something else. So this is a Word document that I have that is just full of pictures for different seed packets that I'm using for printing things. And up at the top, I have this table of contents. And what I would do in the final version of this is each of these would become a link. And I don't have the one, I had a flower one open that did exactly this. But what I would do is I would make each of these pages a link, insert the bookmark, make this one corn. This one is temptress. But I have it just before the bookmark. Let's see. Okay, hopefully this will work now. There we go. Oh, you know what it is? You can't have spaces in here. That is why it's being silly. It has nothing to do with the location I've clicked. That's all. You can see I recently learned this myself, and so I'm still working out the bugs. But then I could go up to my bulleted list up here, put in my new type of corn that I've added. Oops. And then I could add this as a hyperlink. In this way, if I needed to print a particular seed packet, I'd be able to jump anywhere in the document and get to the right one. Because this is a page that's, hundreds of seed packets and pictures long, and that would be really frustrating to try to navigate on its own. So that's one way that you might use that. And so that was what I was hoping to cover today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and end the recording. And thank you all for listening.